Morning again. Before Mr. Williams comes up with his presentation, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our Juneteenth Planning Committee members. And I'm going to introduce them to you. And they are Sister Teresa Counts Davis. She's over there. All right. Sister Myrna Franklin, Dr. Constance Yearly, Sister Moretta Franklin, Deacon Lynn Walton, and my grandboys, Amari Harmon Middleton and Amir Harmon Middleton. And if you look at the front of your program, my grandson, Amari Harmon Middleton, designed that program, designed the front of our program. Amen. And also, another one of our committee members is Deacon Matthew Gooden. Deacon Gooden could not be with us here today. He is with his family celebrating their family reunion. We also want to acknowledge our vendors. And some of them you already see outside: Oak Street Health, City of Columbia, Public Relations and Marketing Department. And Oak Street Health is Sister Michelle Anita Noble and Sister Middleton. And Veronica Walker is the representative from the City of Columbia Public Relations and Marketing Department. And all of those ladies were very receptive to coming out today and celebrating Juneteenth with us. And also Sister Chelsea Reed from the Richland County Vector Control. And Sister Reed, Chelsea was with us last year, and she wanted to be with us again this year. And Deacon Mamie Tyler contacted Chelsea on our behalf, and we're glad to have Chelsea back again this year. But we also have the City of Columbia Police Department. Thank them for being out. The City of Columbia Fire Department, Patterson Dental, and the toothbrushes and toothpaste that you have are from Patterson Dental. And I'm thinking, Richland County Sheriff Department and the nice little Ford Mustang they got out there. And they actually let one of the children sit in the driver's seat. And I might try to go out there and see if I can get me a seat in that. I don't want to be in the back seat. Just but thank you all for coming. And again, thank you all for the vendors who are here as well. And please, if you have not already done so, please visit our vendors. Sister Counts Davis.
Good morning. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce one of our featured speakers today, Mr. Cecil Williams. We've been emailing and calling, and I said, can you send some information about who you are, how to introduce yourself? And he said, all you need to say is, here he is. Not going to do that. Not for such a great person. But Cecil Williams, a native of Orangeburg, was engaged in the field of photography for his entire career. Yes, everybody's nodding their head. We've seen those pictures in jet and ebony and so forth and so on. He graduated from Claflin University and since received honorary degrees from Paul Quinn College, Dallas, Texas, and the Ecumenical University, Columbia. Now, during his youth, that is when he became the Jet Magazine's youngest photographer. He is a recipient of the Order of the Palmetto and the Vemore Award, both presented by our governor of South Carolina. In 2019, Cecil and his wife Barbara, who was unable to join him today, and sister Brenda, founded the first and only civil rights museum in South Carolina, which is the South Carolina Civil Rights Museum. So ladies and gentlemen, he is Mr. Cecil Williams.
Good morning. I bring you greetings from Orangeburg. I didn't mean for that to imply that I was well known or anything, but just simply that if she had said, well, here you are, that would have been good. So thank you very much for that. a very fine presentation. I am so proud to be with you today. We have ongoing in Orangeburg right now an invitational golf tournament that right now is going on. It started at about 8 o'clock. And we're going to have a lot of fun there today, but it's an invitational golf tournament to raise funds for a civil rights museum that we've started in Orangeburg that's somewhat described on your program. So I am very appreciative to, again, Ms. Counts and all the people that are responsible for me being here today. When I got here this morning and I saw Mr. Kennerly, who, again, ladies and gentlemen, this is an American hero. You see, freedom is not free. Somebody had to fight for it. Somebody had to struggle. People died. People mortgaged their homes to make it better for us all today. And although there have been many changes, again, there's much more to be done until we, as people of color, are recognized in this great country, a country of freedom, justice, and humanity, that is a place that's fair and equitable to everyone. And although we've made great strides, I think you would have to admit with what's happening in America today, we still have a little way further down the road to kick the can to make things as it should be. Because color is such a unimportant thing. We're all human beings. God made one type of species, and that is the human species. And the subtle differences between us should not matter, but it still does matter in America today. Unfortunately, it's not going to be sustaining. It's not going to last. Anytime there comes along someone that preaches hate, division, and trying to destroy one of the greatest democracies in America, it's not going to work. But one thing can be sure. We have experienced things like this, so I'm sure that us elders, we will be able to sustain what's going to be happening in America in the next few years and come out of it, and not only, we will thrive even in the midst of things that's going on today. So I kind of want you to know that. I believe that deep in my heart, that again, it's not going to be sustainable. Again, I said I'm appreciative to Ms. Theresa Counts Davis and the committee who brought me here today. It is my great opportunity to share a few comments with you today, because we're celebrating, even though it's a few days past, again, June 19th, again, an important period in our history that for a long time was not really celebrated or observed or commemorated, but a time when, again, due to the lack of communication and like we have today, it took a long time after the Civil War was over for everyone and uniformly to be informed that, hey, you are now free. And I think one of the last states for the information to get down to, I think, was Texas. And when people who were enslaved at the time found out that they were now free, that a war had been fought, and again, the Union won, the South, again, failed, that they were now free. Many of those people who were free, they needed, and they did inform their former enslavers that if now you want us to stay here to work, you're going to have to pay us. It's going to have to be more equitable than it has been. Many chose to stay with, again, their enslavers. And then many moved on, and many moved and left the areas they were. So that's what we all talk about. We're talking about June 19th, which I'm sure you know the story about. But I'm here to share some great news with you today. Again, the museum that's described on the second page of your program today, I think is something that's been needed. You see, a lot of times in history, we find that historians, you see, they tell, you might say, history, his story. And a lot of times it's written by a person that is using his experiences and his research and then the bibliography of other books that have been published, and they write a story. So history has not told the right story about South Carolina and the struggles that we, again, faced in, again, trying to um, move this country into a position where it treated all people with, again, dignity and justice. That did not quite reach the books, the publications, and the historians have not told the South Carolina perspective. Now, with absolutely not one bit of disrespect for the person that most people know about, and even small school-aged children, or if you took your phone or your computer and you Google and search for who or when or where did the American Civil Rights Movement begin, in about 4 lines down, it would say, again, this movement, which happened between roughly about 1940 to 1970, the Civil Rights Movement of America had its beginning in Montgomery, Alabama, with the Reverend Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and the people of Montgomery who marched and demonstrated. And in effect, what they did, they integrated the public transportation system of Montgomery, Alabama. And so that's the historical account. That's what will come up. And there will be nothing about South Carolina in it at all, in that explanation. Not even if you read Wikipedia, or if you get a Google, or if you use like what a lot of students now are using, a lot of adults, AI, which is coming along fast, you get that answer, that it was the Reverend Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and the people of Montgomery, Alabama that started the American Civil Rights Movement. But you see, when Rosa Parks sat down on December 1st, 1955, and that a few days later they elected the Reverend Martin Luther King on December 5th, and historians say that was the beginning. Remember now, that's 1955. But the definition of when something starts, a movement, say in this particular case, the Civil Rights Movement of America, the definition of it, in fact, the definition really, whether it's a Webster's or some other kind of way that you're referencing, it is sort of hazy of what they explain as the start of a movement or revolution or a movement like the Civil Rights Movement. It's a little hazy. But it basically breaks down to when something happens that's significant enough to impact a large number of people or a way of say, life. Civil rights movement. So it gets its definition from, again, a time when this began to happen. But that was 1955 that most historians refer to. But ladies and gentlemen, here in South Carolina, Columbia, I want to tell you that, what about Isaac Woodard in 1944 in Batesburg? Now here's what he did. Isaac Woodard had gone to serve his country, and on the last day he was in service, he was traveling by bus along with a lot of his buddies. And they were drinking and celebrating very happy because this was the last day they were going to be in the United States Army. And because Isaac Woodard, he asked to go to the bathroom maybe one time too many. The bus driver got irritated. And when they stopped in Batesburg, the bus driver reported Isaac Woodard to the police officer. I think his name was Shull, S-C-H-U-L-L, I believe. And Shull removed Isaac Woodard from the bus, arrested him, and beat him unmercifully. So much so that he punched his eyes out. He blinded him, put him in a cell overnight, and the next morning discovering that he had blinded him. Now, that was 1944. Now, that in itself, as significant as it was, and as tragic as it was that he was blinded, when Shull, the police officer, goes before a trial, he's found in 30 minutes innocent of doing what he even admitted he did. That's the kind of justice, or or miscarriage of justice that went on in South Carolina during that period of time. The jury found him innocent, even though he admitted he did it. That was the kind of justice that people of color received back during those days. But here's what happened. Here's the other side of the story. As results of that incident, President Harry Truman, recognizing that here was a serviceman treated that way, he issued an executive order to integrate the armed services. And that, you might say, was the biggest, you might say, civil rights kind of thing affecting thousands of people, not just 180,000 people in Montgomery, Alabama. That affected millions of people in the United States, the integration of the services. But again, we don't get credit for that in South Carolina. So that's just an incident where, again, a civil rights movement had an earlier beginning, 10 years, 11 years earlier than the Reverend Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks in Montgomery, Alabama. Now, no disrespect, the Reverend Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and the people of Montgomery were great American heroes, and he's our greatest symbol. He is the best known symbol of the civil rights movement. All I'm trying to say today, though, is that there's a difference between being best known for something and starting the American civil rights movement and starting something. Or let's take another incident. And I would be here all day if I just described all the things that happened in South Carolina that really were worthy of, again, starting the civil rights movement of America. But let's take another incident. Let's take the people of Clarendon County, Somerton, in fact, 35 miles from my hometown of Orangeburg, in fact. You go to Santee on Highway 301, cross over the Big River, and you're in Clarendon County, and the little town of Somerton, which, by the way, if you even go there today, it's like stepping back into history because it hasn't changed. There's almost no industry. People are largely involved in agricultural kinds of ways of bringing in income. But there, something happened that affected each and every person, not only in here, but all over the United States and all over the world. Because when Harry Briggs Sr. returned also from serving his country in the Navy, he found that the same segregation that existed before he left, where his children had to go to a dilapidated school, schools that were so bad, in fact, he could be in the classroom and look at the floor and see underneath the school, or no books, or if any books, used books that came maybe from another school. And many in Davis Station near Somerton, and Manning also near Somerton, many of the students going to school there had to walk up to 9 miles a day. In winter months, some of the students would leave when it's dark, and during the shorter months when it's like, it gets dark early, it starts getting dark maybe 5, 6 o'clock, February, March, you would be returning from school when it's dark. That was the kind of conditions there were in South Carolina and a lot of places all over America, but especially very profoundly so in South Carolina, in the southern states. So when Harry Briggs discovered that things had not changed and he had gone to serve his country, Reverend J. DeLane, being inspired by a message delivered at Allen University right here in Columbia by Reverend Hinton, is there anyone brave enough to put their name on a petition to challenge segregation in public education? Reverend Hinton, who was head of the NAACP at the time, challenged a group of people meeting at Allen University. And one of the persons that heard that message was Reverend J. DeLane, who later became an AME minister and who served the people in Clarendon County. Reverend DeLane went around Clarendon County, gathered names rather, and had a tough time trying to get people to sign a petition that was going to be filed against the school board in Clarendon County. But Harry Briggs stepped up to the plate, having that experience, that his sons were still unchanged by the rigid segregation that existed in Clarendon County. So Harry Briggs signed a petition that, ladies and gentlemen, became the first petition to challenge segregation in public education in America. The Briggs versus Elliott petition. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is about 1948 or 1949. Again, 5 or 6 years before, again, Montgomery, Alabama, and all the things that went on that integrated the public transportation system of Montgomery, Alabama. As another example of something in South Carolina that happened long before the brave people of Montgomery, Alabama marched and changed public transportation in Montgomery, Alabama. So that's 2 incidents of something happening in South Carolina that don't make the history book and put in the proper perspective that gives us our place in history. A third example, and I see many friends from South Carolina State in Orangeburg. Of course, I'm a resident of Orangeburg my entire life. Mr. Tobin back there, I think, could also attest to something I'm about to say now. But as a third kind of event that happened that is worthy enough of being called the beginning of something that happened in South Carolina, happened in about 1955, 4 months before the Montgomery bus boycott, which happens in December 1st. There was a student by the name of Fred Moore from Charleston, South Carolina, and Fred Moore became the Student Government Association president of South Carolina State University. I'm a graduate of Claflin, by the way, right across, only a fence separates. So we were involved too. But there was an ongoing boycott against the merchants that practice racism in Orangeburg, led by people like James Sultan, who operated a filling station, and many others. And they were boycotting, again, the merchants that fired parents from their jobs who had also signed a petition that, again, came as an aftermath of an event also that happened before the events in Montgomery, and that was what is called the Brown versus Board of Education decision. The Supreme Court, 9 judges, had declared that segregation is, again, unconstitutional. And again, that's another event that, again, changed before, again, what happened in Montgomery, Alabama. That was May 17th, 1954. But the backstory of that is, where did Brown versus Board of Education come from? It came, ladies and gentlemen, from the template case, which is called Briggs versus Elliott. So when Harry Briggs signed that petition, that was the first case, again, of the 5 cases that make up what is called Brown. But it's called Brown, and I'm going to tell you why, again, that in just a second. But for 2 years, Briggs versus Elliott, with Harry Briggs being the signature, then joined by 20 other names, was the first and only case resting at the Supreme Court. And it was moved to the Supreme Court, being present there, because in Charleston, South Carolina, argued by Thurgood Marshall, they lost, again, to, ask for, better schools for their children in, Clarendon County. So the Briggs versus Elliott is the first of the 5 cases that make up what's called Brown. But here's why it was not called Briggs versus Elliott, the decision that was rendered May 17, 1954, and instead called Brown. Governor Jimmy Burns, our governor at that time, was a moderate segregationist. If you can say, there is such a thing as a moderate segregationist. Again, he wasn't quite as bad as Mississippi's governor and maybe other states, but still yet, again, believed in segregating people. And so fearful that there would be a race riot, he didn't want the South Carolina Briggs versus Elliott case to bear the name of the 5 cases that were gathering together at the Supreme Court. So, himself being a judge, who had served on the Supreme Court and then joining the Truman administration, our governor, Burns, again, persuaded 6 of the judges who had been on the Supreme Court when he was on there, and others, to think about another way of naming that case. And he also called the governor of Kansas, and the governor of Kansas and the attorney general were called, and he persuaded them to think about naming the case that was emerging out of Topeka, Kansas, and rushing it to the Supreme Court, because it wasn't even there yet. There was Briggs already there, and 3 other cases already at the Supreme Court resting there, were waiting to be, again, acted on because it was becoming a class action suit, but they rushed the Topeka, Kansas case into, and he persuaded the judges that because geographically, that Brown was coming out of Topeka, Kansas, a similar case asking for, again, better schools for school children. He persuaded them because of this geographical location. It would be better for it to come out of the middle of you, so it won't look like it appears that you're picking on the South. And they accepted that explanation. So that's how, again, Briggs versus Elliott and the name say to one of the most famous cases in the Supreme Court, our history was hijacked. And again, headed by, again, our governor. So there again, 3 incidents where that give rise to, again, us beginning at the beginning of the American Civil Rights Movement before Montgomery, Alabama. Another thing that I was mentioning, Fred Moore of Charleston, South Carolina, he joined in after the Brown case was decided and announced, one of the first places in the United States to be testing what the Supreme Court had ruled, segregation in public education is unconstitutional. People in Orangeburg were inspired by Thurgood Marshall coming back to Clarendon County, and they wanted to test what the Supreme Court had ruled. So we were first, one of the first in the state of South Carolina to test what the Supreme Court had ruled. So that's why our petition was filed, again, against the school board in Orangeburg. And when we filed that, and parents signed their name to the petition, they were fired from their jobs, and that's why we were boycotted. So the strategy of boycott, which was later adopted by Montgomery, Alabama, again originates in Orangeburg, another credit for Orangeburg. In addition to that, before we started boycotting the merchants, we also started sitting in drives led by Fred Moore and the Student Government Association at South Carolina State College. And so we did sit-ins. But if you look in the history book, who gets the credit for originating the sit-ins? It goes to, again, North Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina. If you look in your history book or Google and search that, it says that the sit-ins first occurred February the 1st, 1960. And we did that in 1955, but we don't get credit for it. So South Carolina historically, including us, we have not asserted our civil rights history and the things that we're involved in. So there, ladies and gentlemen, are 3 or 4 things that, again, we, engaged in that was sort of hijacked, and that's why we aren't even mentioned when it comes down to who or where or when the American Civil Rights Movement started. But after 10 years trying to get the state, trying to get the city, the county, going to organizational meetings that I was a part of, being a professional photographer working in Orangeburg, and having absolutely no success. One day I asked my wife, Barbara, who was that time in 2019 a retired educator, worked in the public schools, of which Mr. Tobin, again, was superintendent, and others. And my sister Brenda, who was, again, part of the hospital administrative staff in Orangeburg. I had a little talk with them. And I asked them, I said, do you think that we can maybe bring about making a museum? So here I was at that time in 2019, way past retirement, and I didn't see anyone else want to take up this task. So in 2019, my sister, my wife, and I started what has become the first and only civil rights movement in South Carolina. I initially named it after me, not you know, thinking maybe in a grand enough idea, a way of doing it, but we later changed it to the South Carolina Civil Rights Museum. Now, my wife and I had built 20 years earlier a house next door to where the place that is the site of the museum that we have now, that we started in 2019. So we had another house. And I had used the old house as my photography studio. And in the very beginning, telling my wife, well, maybe I'll rent out part of it, because it was quite large just for a photography studio. And so I had this 3,000 square foot home in Orangeburg that was going to become the site that my wife, my sister, and I had pooled together a small amount of money. Now, we knew, and we were very realistic, that museums cost millions of dollars. I think after about 3 months, we pulled together about $60,000. I had about 20-some thousand. We got about $10 other thousand donation, and my wife and sister put the remainder in, and we had $60,000. And we called ourselves starting a statewide civil rights museum with 60, knowing that it cost millions to do that. Well, we did have the building, which was my former house and studio. And one other thing that we had, by virtue of the fact that I worked for 10 years as the youngest correspondent for Jet Magazine, I had collected over 5,000 probably artifacts, documents, and images that told the stories about many things that happened in South Carolina. I had a large collection of things that represented. So that was one thing to my advantage, or our advantage. And so we launched the first and only Civil Rights Museum in 2019 just from that kind of idea. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it is up to us, it is our legacy to really commemorate this period of time. We're the last, we're among the last that can even that could have done this. The stories have not been told, and I think I was standing on the shoulders of so many people when we made that decision. I think that what we did was a divine blessing. A divine blessing that at my age, and my wife and my sister's age at the time, that we were able to do this. And we pulled it off. After 45,000 people from 2019 forward, 12,000 school-aged children came to see our museum. And by the way, you had to come into a out-of-the-way location, off the beaten path, so to speak, in Orangeburg, in a residential area, in a former house, to go to the museum. But 45,000 people visited. And the city and the county, and the state listened. So I'm very proud today that we are now the recipients of where they are building us a new $10 million museum in Orangeburg. And people like Congressman Clyburn, 6th District Congressman, who right now, going on in Orangeburg, is attending our invitational golf tournament that will help support. I think we've raised $25,000, because you see the city and the county, although they are building the building, and they have millions to do that, we're going to have to raise our own operational expenses. A director, I'm serving at it now, but we want to reach out and get a world-class museum director and staff at the museum in Orangeburg. So we have to do that ourselves. So that's why we have this benefit that's going on right now. But when we move into that new building in what is now expected to be about September, that's just the start. We'll have an empty building. And ladies and gentlemen, it is right across the street from South Carolina State and Claflin University on Boulevard. Now, in addition to the building that is being built for our museum, 800 feet away, 600 to 800 feet away, Congressman Clyburn, before all this crazy stuff started happening in Washington, was able to get $23 million for a parking garage. And those of you who have electric vehicles, there's going to be an electric charging station there. But you'll be able to come into Orangeburg at 3 entrances: exit 145, exit 149, and 154. And if you came in 145, which is Magnolia, it comes off of Interstate 26. 145 enters into what is called Magnolia, and you pass by the colleges. And then on the right side on Boulevard, 600 to 800 feet away from Trinity, a site that many meetings were held, which brought people like the Reverend Martin Luther King and Thurgood Marshall and others to speak during the Civil Rights Movement period. We're that close to Trinity. So that's where the parking garage, because we hope to pull into our museum in Orangeburg 200,000 visitors per year. Very ambitious, but still yet realizable, potentially realizable, because on a day-to-day basis, a survey has determined that 200,000 cars, from about 125,000 to 200,000 cars, and of course trucks as well, we got to put the trucks there, pass Orangeburg every day, from Columbia to Charleston. And we merely want to get a small percentage of them to be attracted by billboards, and we have now 3 billboards that are across the state of South Carolina now, to drop in to see this, what we hope to be a world-class museum. Because the story about South Carolina's, their legacy to the Civil Rights Movement has not been told. And we're going to have to challenge, again, historians. Because one thing that we have to an advantage of historians who write books is that I am a first-hand account representative, and I live this history. I went to jail twice, and I've got the photographs to back it up, and it is irrefutable. We have the holy grail of evidence pointing to our history happening before, again, many others get credit for it. So that's what we will be doing in Orangeburg at our museum. And although I have a large collection about events that happen all over the state of South Carolina, we are appealing to the public. If you have images, not newspapers now, we have newspapers, we can find newspapers from any time, but if you have images, documents, or artifacts that pertain to the Civil Rights Movement period, roughly 1940 to 1970. You see, images, artifacts, and documents help us to tell a story about something that's involved with a period, as we are doing with the Civil Rights Movement period. And we use those to build a story so that when people come into the museum and they'll look up on the wall or look in a showcase, these stories can be built from those artifacts. So we're reaching out to the general public. Please help us. We need your artifacts. I don't have it all. We had some great people, again, working to and sacrificing and leadership. And the general public, who mostly involved with students like Mr. Tobin and others. And right after my presentation here, you're going to listen to, again, another hero, because it took a long time for South Carolina to get to the place to accept all people without regard to race, creed, or color. And so when the next speaker will be telling you about an incident that happened on February the 8th, 1968, it was called the Orangeburg Massacre. And as you know, South Carolina has another distinction. We were the last state in the nation to remove the Confederate flag from the State House grounds. Inspired by, it had inspired the Governor Haley, to, again, a very tragic incident in Charleston, South Carolina, that we just observed the 10th anniversary, where 9 churchgoers on Wednesday, I think, service were gunned down by a crazy gunman that was inspired by, again, his belief in racism and the Confederate flag, and he admitted so. Incidents like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, in concluding, I'm very proud, very pleased that I was able to, again, kind of outline some of the things we're doing in Orangeburg and invite you right now to think about putting in your calendar sometimes in December. We will probably have what is called a soft opening until we kind of get it right. We got to tweak it. And we got to use maybe you as kind of guinea pigs. Come to our museum before we fully open it up. So I'm issuing an invitation for you right now. Please think about coming to Orangeburg. Perhaps in December, it could be the first of the year. We will have a 100 and probably 150 seat auditorium. It's about a 10,000 square foot building, 2 stories. Yes, and there's an elevator. But we will be displaying all of the important incidents happening in South Carolina civil rights movement in that period, and all the important players. The Orangeburg Massacre, 68 is represented. But people that you might recognize, Jessica Simpkins here in Columbia. We have, again, in Charleston, a person that, again, that played such a great role. People like Harvey Gantt, who integrated Clemson University in that story, the story of the integration. South Carolina also has the distinction of being the state where the institution of higher learning, we were the last state in the nation to admit people in higher education into the public schools, when Harvey Gantt did that. So in so many ways, it seems that South Carolina, all through history, in things that are good, we come in last, and things that are bad, we come in first. So we are hoping that something like the civil rights movement will be there as a legacy of change coming to the state, to give recognition to the people that, again, played such an important role that who are not recognized today. And so, like that great song that one of my favorite persons sang this back during the civil rights movement period, wrote a song called "A Change Is Gonna Come" by Sam Cooke. We have him in here because I told the mayor of Columbia about 3 months ago of an incident where another situation where, again, South Carolina doesn't get recognition. But my wife and I attended a concert at the Township Auditorium in 1963, I believe. And I had a chance, since I had a press pass and was working for Jet Magazine at the time, to go backstage. And so we got there, and because my wife and I were fans of, again, Sam Cooke and all of his "You Send Me," in fact, was one of my, again, favorites. And we had a chance to go backstage, and I talked one-on-one to Sam Cooke. And I said, when is your next album coming out? He told me that. And I said, are you writing any new songs? He said, yes, I'm writing. I haven't got it together yet, but Bobby Dowling has got a song that's called "Blowing in the Wind." It sounded like a ballad. And in a way, it speaks to, again, and resonates with a lot of things we relate to with, again, civil rights and the pursuit of freedom, justice. And he said, I haven't named it yet, but it's going to be about changing things are going to change in America. And then later that song became, again, "A Change Is Going to Come" was the title by Sam Cooke. And it starts off, as you know, I was born by the river in a little tent. But oh yes, it's been a long time coming, but a change is going to come. So ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude my presentation today, I want you to know that, again, a change is going to come to South Carolina history and its legacy. And we hope to establish that we too deserve to be noted. And our people did fantastic things that made a change to this country. We participated in a revolution in this country where, without bullets, but with our hearts and minds and soul, that brought about a change. We helped to tweak the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. We changed the United States Constitution without firing a bullet. Sure, there was violence, so that sometimes there were minor things, but again, we did that with marching and demonstrating and going to jail. Mr. Tobin, a jailbird for freedom and justice. Me, being arrested twice as a jailbird. That change is going to be happening in your lifetime. The end of the year, again, I invite you to attend, look at the newspapers and news reports. It will be announced when we would have a ribbon cutting, and we invite each and every person to come to Orangeburg to witness what will be a change in the way that, again, history is written. In fact, we're taking on a role with our museum that museums largely do not take. Yes, we will exhibit and display history, but ladies and gentlemen, our intent also is a role that museums don't largely take. We are going to, again, reclaim our history because it needs to be done. We have already filed a petition to the United States Supreme Court and lost. In fact, it was not even recognized. They didn't even care to comment on it. The son of Harry Briggs and I filed a petition in December of 2024 asking the Supreme Court in the petition to change that name. We knew it wouldn't have a chance, but I believe that someday it will, because right has a way of winning. In fact, I'd like to conclude by telling you again, informing you one of the great sayings by the Reverend Martin Luther King that I like, that in a way kind of expresses what I think is going to be happening in South Carolina's history. I think King said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It may take a long time, but I think justice is going to come, recognition is going to come to the people of South Carolina who deserve it. Thank you very, very much. It's been my great pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you.
You take this accolades. So, Mr. Williams, on behalf of Second Calvary Baptist Church, whom James M. Hinton was a previous pastor,
Okay.
we'd like to extend you a token of appreciation for your coming here and sharing with us all of your embedded history. And we certainly wish the museum the most success, and we will be there when we cut the ribbon. But yes, Reverend Hinton was pastor of Second Calvary Baptist Church.
Reverend Hinton, again, another person that, again, hidden in history, but we're gonna bring that out. So please come and see us. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Mr. Williams. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we will reconvene for the presentation from Dr. Thomas Kennedy, Deacon Thomas Kennedy. Amen. So 5-minute fellowship, restroom break, and visit our vendors again.
Okay.
know who I was looking for. Then I say, you know what? I might not recognize who. Anyway, you might have had an afro back then.
I had a nice one. Nice one. Yes, I did.
Yeah,
Yes,
man.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Cynthia Roddy. I'm Carolyn's cousin.
Okay, good to see you.
I have been trying to think of his name. Down there in Orangeburg. And he working with me. Lee Robinson. But he married a young lady here from South Carolina.
Hmm.
I'm trying to remember his name. I think his first name is, but I just cannot remember his name.
Hmm.
But he was one of the students at the shooting that night.
Uh-huh. Wasn't Bobby Eaton?
I can't remember what his. I'll probably have to go get my yearbook.
Yeah.
I can do that and look in there and see if I can find the yearbook.
Okay.
But he worked at Olympic High School. Graduated in Charlotte, South Carolina State.
It was during that time, during the...
Well, yeah, see, he was a student at South Carolina State
Right.
during the masters.
Okay, okay.
And then after he graduated, he came to and I worked at Olympic High School. We were co-workers.
Might have the names of everybody who was, I'd have to look for them. I
Yeah,
probably have
okay.
everybody's name.
Yeah. I was trying to remember what he got wounded.
Hmm.
One of the students who got wounded, he didn't die. But he was one of the. I think how he
We
went on.
talked about it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna try to remember his. But I think Bobby was. That just came to me when I was coming. Talking.
That's the only thing
Because you know they use
I can think about now is Bobby Eaton.
Ely.
Edie.
Edie. Okay.
Edie, J-D-D-Y.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to reconvene. And again, thank you all again for your continued being here as we continue to commemorate our 19th annual Juneteenth commemoration. Our next presentation will be by our own Deacon Thomas Kennelly. And when we agreed to ask Deacon Kennelly for the presentation, I kind of made the assumption that, you know, everybody knows Deacon Kennelly. We all know Deacon Kennelly. But, you know, there may be some in the audience who don't know Deacon Kennelly. So what I am going to do is I am going to read you some biographical information from Deacon Kennelly. Deacon Kennelly is a native of Orangeburg, South Carolina, graduated from Wilkinson High School, was actively involved with the Student Council, Highlight Society, vice president of his senior class, a member of the football, basketball, and track teams. He played in the Palmetto All-State football game, attended South Carolina State College on a football scholarship where he majored in sociology. In high school and college, he was active in human rights issues, and I think Mr. Williams touched on that, and was arrested a number of times for sit-ins and demonstrating in the city. Before graduating from South Carolina State, he was wounded in the Orangeburg Massacre on February 8, 1968. Upon graduating from South Carolina State, he was drafted into the United States Army and served 2 years as an artillery specialist. During that time, he served 9 months in Vietnam, in South Vietnam. Upon returning to Orangeburg, he worked on and received his master's degree in 1974. He was hired as an intervention counselor and football coach at Orangeburg Wilkinson High School, where he remained for 3 years, and then was hired at the South Carolina Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, where he remained for 32 years before retiring as a client services consultant. During that time, he also served in the United States Army Reserve for 30 plus years and retired as a Brigade Command Sergeant Major. He's now a member of 2nd Calvary Baptist Church, where he is a deacon, secretary of the Brotherhood Ministry, chairman of the Board of Christian Education Ministry, a member of the North Columbia Community Enrichment Foundation, and he says a very proud alumnus of now South Carolina State University. He is married to Martha Kennelly, and they are the parents of 2 children, 3 grandchildren. He says that he is proud to announce that the youngest is a national champion gymnast. So without further ado, Deacon Thomas Kennelly.
Good afternoon. Well, it's still morning, isn't it? Yeah. Hope you got a chance to get some ice cream before they left.
One more thing, Deacon, before my wife jumps on me. Lunch will be served after Deacon Kennelly's presentation.
Dr. Cecil Williams really took a part of my thunder. He basically gave rise to a lot of things that had transpired in my life that have made a difference. Before we get into the real meat of the discussion, I'd like for a little presentation to be shown. The biggest misfortune in my life was being a part of the Orangeburg Massacre.
The Orangeburg Massacre transpired 55 years ago on February 8, 1968. A violent night where police shot 31 black students, leaving 3 men dead.
None of this had to take place.
America was on fire in 1968. The country was in the middle of a civil rights movement that saw young activists, many of them young HBCU students, leading the charge to desegregate businesses across the South. One such establishment was Orangeburg's All-Star Bowling Lanes, a popular hangout spot that refused black patrons years after the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
The owner, the proprietor there, Harry Floyd, would certainly turn them away because his indication was that this is private property and I can have access to anybody who I want to be there. And so, in essence, what he was saying was, you're not welcome.
A group of students at the town's 2 HBCUs, South Carolina State College and Claflin College, led by politically active members of South Carolina State's football team, took to All-Star Bowling Lanes to protest. Those protests started February 5th when students waged a sit-in at the bowling alley's lunch counter.
They asked to participate in the bowling experience, and he told them that they needed to go away. They came back with the only baseball player and his wife on the campus, named John Butcher. John Butcher goes in, he bowls 3 frames or so. The black students came in, and Mr. Floyd told them they would have to leave out because it was for, he said then, member something. And so John indicated to him that I'm not a member. I just happen to be white, and you've allowed me to bowl.
The next day, students returned. 15 were arrested. Tensions would flare for days, culminating on the night of February 8th, when more than 100 students converged on South Carolina State campus, lighting bonfires and singing protest songs.
were in a face-off with law enforcement officers, local police, state police, and then eventually the National Guard. The National Guardsmen were the ones that positioned themselves very neatly on the embankment and rested their rifles as if we were at rifle range practicing. At some point, somebody threw a banister and hit a law enforcement officer, and they concluded that he was shot. He wasn't.
When I got to the front of where the activity was, is when the shooting started.
9 patrolmen opened fire on the students, shooting 31 of them, killing 3 men, Henry Smith and Samuel Hammond, who played football at South Carolina State, and Delano Middleton, a 17-year-old high school athlete. Most of the victims were shot in their backs and sides.
I didn't know I was hit until I got back to the infirmary. My right upper arm was bleeding, and my right hip was also bleeding. Why was there a need to fire on defenseless students? Why was deadly force used?
Only one person would face any jail time for the events that week. A black student named Cleveland Sellers, who helped organize the protest and had been shot in the back, spent 7 months in jail for not dispersing when ordered to.
The 9 police officers were tried in a federal court, and they believed that their lives were in danger, and that was it. So they were exonerated.
The Orangeburg Massacre has been overlooked as a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement, a historic American tragedy, and a reminder of the links taken by athlete activists in this country to change it.
That we look back and we see in African American schools or HBCUs, there's a rich history of athletes being engaged and involved. That's a tradition that's been in place and is still in place.
South Carolina State University has done its part to never let us forget what happened on their campus, honoring the event by naming its basketball arena the Smith Hammond Middleton Memorial Center, and hosting memorials and events to commemorate the bravery and remind us of the brutality of that night.
Until the Orangeburg Massacre the truth has been told and found, they will never be able to say that race relations in South Carolina is in fact near perfect.
We remember, we honor, respect, live for them, and make sure by any means necessary we continue to shine the lights on Smith, Hammond, Middleton, and any other beautiful black spirits.
Why did Amazon?
I think that pretty much sums up what transpired way back when. And when I say way back when, I'm talking about way back when. Most of you were not even aware of life at that time. Most of you probably weren't born. But the fact still remains that so much took place before you actually were aware of. And I guess what I'm saying to you is you're standing on the shoulders of individuals who died, who gave their all in order to make sure that we were free and could do the things that would certainly bring glory to us and to our families as we move forward. The Orangeburg Massacre, of course, in my life, was probably the most devastating thing that ever took place. 3 things happened in my life that really made a difference. The death of my parents, who died 7 years apart, but they died pretty much on the same day. The Vietnam War, which was ramped up during that time, was really ranging all over places at that time. So to get into specifics on that, we're talking about another day and a half. But the most significant was the Orangeburg Massacre. The Orangeburg Massacre. Sit-ins and demonstrations started way back in 1960 when, I think my brother was involved in one of those demonstrations where they got on a bus and came to Columbia to certainly try to get the administration, the state administration, to look at what was happening. He said they got on a bus. They didn't know where they were going, but when they got to Columbia and when they found out where they were going, he said, well, that's where I should have been, and that's where I was glad I went. These demonstrations, as I say, were started back in 1960. And by 1968, things were really, really hot. Racism was rampant. There were things that we couldn't do, and we knew we couldn't do it. We knew that the officials would try to do everything they could to annihilate us. You know what? I'm proud of the fact that I had been arrested 12 times. Spent time in the Pink Palace in Orangeburg. Reverend Hood could probably tell you a little bit about the Pink Palace. It was probably a place that you'd never want anybody to go to. No matter how much you might have hated them, you certainly wouldn't want them to go to that Pink Palace. And of course, a lot of this took place while I was in high school and of course in college as well. Our college coach said, listen, I don't want you guys involved in too much of what's going on politically, because that could affect your scholarship. Initially, the attitude was, well, coach says that we shouldn't be involved, so we'll just back off and kind of leave it alone. But as time went on, we saw that these are things that were happening that affected us as individuals. As whether we're football players, whatever the case might be, we had to get involved, and we did. Nobody, from what I understand, lost a scholarship, but still the fact remains we actually got involved in the things that were happening on and around campus. And believe me, a lot of young people put a lot of emphasis on what athletes did. And if we stood out, then their attitude was, well, these guys actually are putting themselves on the line, so we might as well go ahead and stand up and do what they're doing, because they realize that this could affect their scholarships and could actually cause them not to attend school anymore. On the night of February 8th, I think on the film it says it was a Friday night, it was actually a Thursday night. Temperature was 22 degrees. Well, let me go back a little bit before I get into that. We had gone down, the students had gone down to the bowling alley Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of that same week. We were not allowed to bowl, and as luck would have it, on that the Tuesday night, with a number of students there, somebody pressed against the window, and guess what? The window broke. Police officers were there, fire trucks were there. As a result, when that happened, students fled, trying to get back to campus. Those who didn't make it, those who were behind, and some of them were females, students from Claflin and South Carolina State. Some fell, they were hosed, billy clubs were used against them, and some actually had to go to the hospital. And that caused us as students, we were upset. We were bothered to the nth degree. Here are our students, all we were doing was trying to bowl, trying to get into the bowling alley. And the proprietor didn't want us there, and you may have seen it, he had a sign on private property. But one of the students was a white student. One of our students was a white student. He went in and bowled a couple of games. So if that was a private situation, then he wouldn't have been allowed to bowl because he wasn't a member of the club that the proprietor owned. So what I'm saying to you in essence was, that was a joke. We went down to the bowling alley. Those 2 nights. And on that third night was when the window was broken and kids were actually maimed, so to speak. After that happened, when we got back on campus, on the next night, which was February the 8th, there was a bonfire built on campus. 22 degrees, as I said before. Kids were upset. Kids were terribly upset. The attitude, some just talked among themselves. Some took the attitude, well, maybe we can break into the ROTC department and get some weapons. And then others just waited around to see what would happen. As luck would have it, well, now, not call it luck, but as circumstances might be, the city police were called, fire truck was called. We love those fire trucks, didn't we? and National Guard were actually brought in. There were probably 75 to 100 students who had congregated on the front of the campus. If you saw in the video itself, there were 8, 9, 10, or 11 police officers who had actually taken up position in a grassy knoll in front of the campus. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't have, when we moved to the front of the campus, we didn't know what would take place. As Brother Sellers mentioned, there was an old house across next door to the campus. Somebody, from what I understand, took a banister and threw it at one of the police officers. That, from what I understand, gave them probable cause to say, we got to fight back. These young people are trying to hurt us. Now, I personally didn't realize that actually happened until after the fact, because this whole building, this whole house was there, and kids really didn't bother about going in and around that area. But the shooting started. It must have been 10, 12, 15 seconds. Boom, boom, boom. The next thing you saw was kids falling to the ground, hollering, screaming, saying, am I hurt? Am I going to die? What's going to happen to me? Kids started crawling back towards the interior of the campus. One of the football players at that time from Columbia, Robert Davis, called him Red Davis. Red was hit about 3 centimeters from his spine. We picked Red up and took him to the infirmary. As students crawled back towards it, because they didn't know what might have happened after after the shooting stopped. All of the students started crawling back towards an area called Loman Hall, which was probably about 100 yards from the area where the shooting took place. When we got to the infirmary, it was chaos. There was a charge nurse there, and you got 35 or 40 kids who coming in, wanting services, being injured, and some actually died that particular night. Samuel Hammond, for one. Sam was a football player from Ocala, Florida. Cecil mentioned something about Sam Cooke. Sam Hammond had a voice like Sam Cooke. The guy could really sing. He was an excellent athlete and really had the potential to move to the next level. Henry Smith was a sophomore there at South Carolina. No, I'm sorry, he was a freshman that year. He was an activist most of the time. But as we move forward, you'll find out something about Henry Smith and Cleveland Sellers. But when these young men were shot, and everybody else collected themselves and was taken to the infirmary, because there was no room for anybody, individuals who had automobiles started taking people to the hospital because there wasn't any other way to get there. Robert Davis, certainly, as said, Red Davis told me in confidence that when he got to the hospital, he was told by one of the police officers, he said, using the N-word, he said, if you say another word, I will put your lights out for good. And here's a police officer who's taken the attitude that, well, these kids are rambunctious, they're riotous, and as a result, I'm going to scare them as best I could. And that's what they did. The effort was to scare us, to strike fear into our hearts. And that's precisely what they did. Now, as we would have found out later, the weapons that were used by the police officers, it still bothers me to some degree. After 57 years, it still bothers me. The weapons that were used, they were firing buckshot. They were firing double-aught buckshot. If anybody in here does any hunting, you know that double-aught buckshot is used for big game. Big game, deer. And my question would be, and you would probably ask the same, why were they using big game to shoot on campus at defenseless students? We fought this situation tooth and nail for a number of years. After I graduated, I was drafted into the military. After that time, I was sent to South Vietnam. So after being exposed to the Orangeburg Massacre, to see students being maimed, being shot, and some actually dying, I sent to Vietnam. And what do you think I found there? Maiming, killing, injuring, death all over again. I was bothered to the nth degree and was only able to talk about what transpired within the last 10, 12 years. I was bitter. I was totally upset because I wanted to get some revenge. I wanted the population to know. I wanted those government officials to know that they just couldn't take advantage of us and us not do anything about it. It bothered me, and it still bothers me. And of course, I've been involved in sessions at the VA and in some personal sessions just to try to come to grips with what had actually transpired back then. We were told, in essence, that the governor had said that this was good for them. They brought it on themselves. And now, this infuriated us to the nth degree. This happened on February 8th, 1968. Kent State happened March 4th, 1970. You heard more about what took place at Kent State than you did about what happened in Orangeburg. I guess we were not well known enough. We were a small HBCU college, and there was no intent, there was no effort, if you will, to try to harm anybody in any way, form, or fashion. Those individuals from Kent State got reparations. Their families got reparations because some died there too. The governor at that time formed a commission to look at reparations for the families of those who were killed. That commission was formed in 2007. We have not heard a word from that commission since that time. So maybe it's still in committee somewhere. I don't know where it might be. But it was such that we realized that we were not very well thought of. We had to come up from where we were, had to pull our own selves up. And as a result, it made life that much more difficult. For me personally, it was like I was looking at difficulties that I didn't control. I couldn't control. I couldn't control things at SC State because I just walked up and the action started. And I was hit 3 times. I was hit in my right shoulder, my left hip, and my left big toe. And that bothered me because I just bought some new desert boots. Good boots, paid good money for them too. But I had to give them up. It was such that we didn't, as I talked to members who were involved during that time, when I say members, the class members, those were students who were at that time. And there are not many of us left now, because that was a long time ago, 57 years ago. And we look at the kinds of things that happen, and you share experiences, and the kind of experiences you share are such that you realize that a lot took place that you weren't even aware of. There were more than 30 students who were actually shot that night. I think there were 32 or 30. There was one female who was pregnant, and she was also one of the ones who was injured. She did go ahead and have a baby, but she could have easily lost the child. Let me give you some of the comments that were made by the officials. City officials as well were saying that we brought it on ourselves. We had weapons on campus. We didn't have any kind of weapons. The effort as it relates to that young man or whoever it was who threw the banister and hit a police officer gave them probable cause. The officers who fired were eventually arrested, if you will. In fact, I had to come home from Vietnam to testify against those officers, and I told it like it was. Their contention was, since we were in a position where the kids were aggressive, and tried to harm us, that gave us probable cause, and that's all they needed. Probable cause to say, well, we felt like our lives were threatened. That being the case, and the final verdict was no individuals were found to be guilty. And we knew that. There wasn't any doubt in our mind. We knew what would happen. But I had to go back to Vietnam and face that same kind of degradation all over again. It was hard. It was rough. And but I realized that I wasn't in a position to judge. That's God's realm. I was upset, I was bothered, and I'm still upset and bothered. But I'm not in a position where I can judge anybody, because there's so much I need to do about me. And that being the case, I need all the help I can. And my church has been the best source that I could use in order to get the kind of relief that I need. The man above, if you don't pray to him, if you don't let him know exactly how you feel, of course he knows already, but if you get to a point where you feel like you're too big for God, where you're in a position where you're just shut out, cut off from the master himself, you need to talk to somebody. And maybe your experiences aren't like mine. Maybe your experiences weren't as involved as mine. But the fact still remains, you have issues in life that you need to come to grips with. You really need to come to grips with. Now, I've got reminders, if you will, of what transpired back then. And it's very personal to me, and I hold it very, very dearly. And a dear friend of mine did this, dear friend, and I want you all to take a look at it. Look at some of the things that transpired that we talked about in the video that was done, and some of the things that I've just talked about. So by all means, take a look at this. And if you've got any comments, if you've got any thoughts at all, by all means, don't hesitate to let me know. Please don't hesitate to let me know, because there's a lot more that I could say from the standpoint of in-depth discussions with others. But it's been an eye-opener for me to have been exposed to what I've been exposed to, but still live to talk about it. And because so many individuals have passed on, and they've passed on with frustration. They've passed on with thoughts of things that they wish they had done a long time ago. What I try to do now, whenever I'm given the opportunity, if I can sit down with a youngster, because I know they're not getting the kinds of information that, let me go back a little bit further. I realized that things were so different back then from the standpoint of racism and the things we had to do in order to just gain just a modicum of consideration. Is when I talk to students, I tell them in essence that, again, they're standing on the shoulders of people who died for them, people who gave up themselves, gave up their lives for them. And as a result, when you look at where you are, you need to look down the road and see what you can do to better your own individual conditions. If you don't do that, no telling what might happen to you. You're not going to find out the information that I'm talking to you about now because they're not in the books. They're not in the textbooks. CRT is right before us right now. And there's an effort to just not allow our young people to see or to feel or to experience things that have happened, things that have taken place that directly affect them or indirectly. And if they don't hear it from us, then where are they going to hear it from? If we're not in position, but we can talk to them and tell them and let them know, hey, listen, you come from stock. You've come from something. You've come from situations that could have gone the opposite way. it really could have gone the opposite way, and your life could have not be what it is today if you didn't know what was happening. So if you get the opportunity, talk with these young people. Let them see, let them realize, let them understand. And I've done that with my grandchildren. And they look at me as just to say, first thing they say, well, you're pretty old, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I am. But I've experienced a lot. And I want you to realize that those things that I've experienced are things that you need to know about. Things that you need to know about. History has a tendency to do what? Repeat itself. And if kids don't realize that, if they feel like they're above all that transpired way back then we got a problem. We got a big problem. So let's do what we can, and if there's anything that I can do, I'd be willing to, and let me mention this. On Thursday, I went down to the university with Dr. Donaldson. We took a bus tour down through Remini and through Somerton and 3 or 4 other places where we talked about the Briggs-Delane situation and circumstances. There were 19 high school teachers who were there in this week-long seminar, if you will. So they are aware now of some of the things that have transpired way back when. But we have to be parties of one, if you will, to tell the story. We have to let our young people know, and a lot of older people don't know what transpired either. So as a result, let them know as best you know how. And if you need me in any way, form, or fashion, don't hesitate. Say, hey, can you do this? Can you go with me? Can you talk about something? I don't mind, because I want our kids to know and to be exposed to the kinds of things that transpired way, way back when. You know, as a people, we've been deprived of so much. We still try to live by the Constitution, but we realize, too, that sometimes we can't be and do all that we like to be and all that we like to do. Freedom is not free. And if we don't realize that, if we don't put ourselves in position where well, not necessarily accept what's thrown at us, but you got to question sometimes. You got to let the population know, the populace know that you're not going to stand for anything and everything. And I think most of us have been in that position now. We realize we don't have to stand for foolishness. And I call it foolishness because we look at what's happening in Washington now. We look at the falseness that's taking place now and how it's impacting us as a people. We look at Social Security, we look at Medicare, Medicaid, and these are programs that directly affect us. And if we don't speak to our representatives, and of course sometimes that's almost a useless situation too, because we know where they stand. But we can't stop. We can't just take the attitude that there's nothing we can do, because there's always something. Talk to anybody that you can, and even try to talk to your representatives. And hopefully by the midterm we'll see some changes. But we know what we're fighting. We know about the difficulties that are out there. So I say it to each one of you. No, I won't say that. Be a party of one. Be a party of one. And actually speak out and let it be known how you feel. Any questions, comments, or concerns that you'd like for us to try to entertain before you go to lunch? Well, that's good. Thank you for listening, for your attentiveness, and I appreciate it, because you didn't have to. You could have nodded off, and like Walter Tobin back there, but you were all alert, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Deacon Kennedy, there was no way we could have nodded off during that presentation. We certainly want to thank you for that presentation. Last Saturday at our men's prayer breakfast, Brother Overture Walker, who was our speaker, informed us that we need to tell our story. We need to tell our story. So often, other folk tell our story for us. Deacon Kennedy told us his story. Brother Cecil Williams told us his story. We all have stories that we can tell our children and our grandchildren so that they will understand, sure enough, that freedom is not free, that what the benefits that they enjoy now, somebody had to fight for them, somebody died for them, so that they'll understand all of the benefits that they share. Folk had to really sacrifice for that. So thank you, Deacon Kennedy, for telling us your story. And as
Let me mention one other thing.
yes, sir.
Just wanted to mention one other thing. Henry Smith, if you look at pictures of him, he looked a lot like Cleveland Sellers. And I believe the officials thought that night when they killed Henry Smith that they had killed Cleveland Sellers. Cleveland Sellers was considered as an outsider, living 18 miles away in Denmark, South Carolina. Now, if that's outside, I don't know what being a fur piece is. But I think the officials were certainly upset and bothered because they killed the wrong person. Is there ever a right person to kill? But yeah, that was on the minds of the officials because Cleve was involved with SNCC, Southern Nonviolent Christian Community, and he has been involved for 3 or 4 years. And as a result, Orangeburg was just kind of on his radar screen. And of course, you know, the Cleve went on to Cleve was arrested as a one-man rioter. How did a one-man riot? I don't know. But anyway, he went on to become the president of Boheves College, taught at the university, and now he's retired now and doing well. And of course, Cleve was in jail. He was arrested, stayed in jail for 7 months while his youngest child was born. And that child is a doctor now.
Hey, Kennedy, thank you. We have a token of appreciation for you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Well, okay. All right, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to have our grace, and then we will adjourn to Hinton Hall for lunch. All wise and everlasting and good and gracious God, our Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. We thank you for being with us at our 19th annual Juneteenth commemoration. We thank you for all who have participated with us in this commemoration, Father. We ask now that you would continue to bless each one of us, Father, who are here. Bless the folk who participated with us last night. Bless the folk who have been with us today, to include the vendors and Councilwoman Herbert and others. We thank you as well for Brother Cecil Williams and his presentation. We thank you for Deacon Thomas Kennedy and his presentation as well. Now we ask, Lord, that you would bless this food which we are now about to receive. Let it be used for the nourishment of our soul and body. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. 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 Thank you for your
Sure wasn't?
Oh, man.
Huh?
Don't make me cry, baby. You do.
Take a look at that.